Hey there, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading, wanting to thank you for stopping by to watch this interview and also make it clear to you that this is not a paid-for promotion. I collect no compensation for the interviews I do here. These companies have been identified as opportunities for investment that could provide an above average return on our investment. This is our opportunity to get to know management, to understand the vision for the company, the strategy they plan to implement, and execute to achieve that vision for the company. So if you learn anything here today and you enjoyed the interview, please do us a favor and subscribe to the Alpha Wolf Trading YouTube channel. Hey, good morning, everybody. Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with a follow-up interview with one of my favorites, Glen Lynch from Volatus Aerospace, ticker symbol VLTTF. Glen, thanks for coming in, man, and give us an update on what's happening with the company.
Tim, it's always fun. Great to see you again.
Thanks. Hey, you just put out a fantastic quarter. Maybe the market doesn't seem to care about that, but I care about it. And he had a heck of a quarter. You want to talk about that for just a real quick minute here?
Yeah, so a whole bunch of things happened in that quarter. We announced a partnership with Mitsubishi and Mitsubishi Capital. That's allowed us to introduce a full service financing product for our equipment sales. So it allows us to actually finance enterprise, or let's call it heavy industrial investments, up to $2 million within 48 hours. So that should help us scale and accelerate the conversion rates on our pipeline there. We introduced some remote operations technologies, a whole bunch of news releases around that spot with our air report and some things that are connected to it. We completed a couple of acquisitions. Actually, within the last 2 weeks, it was a very busy quarter. We completed our first prospectus raise, which, funny enough, was more about the current market conditions than it is about raising capital. We needed to get some paper trading in the current market context, I'll say, and that's ultimately intended to help with our volume and ultimately our liquidity. And then the last thing we did was we basically kicked off internally our ESG initiative, which we're really trying to weave into our value proposition as we move forward. So it's been a super exciting quarter. I mean, busy like our team's been extremely busy and super proud of their accomplishments.
And you should be. And speaking of that, not only didn't you and Abby both get an award recently also?
Yeah, so that was Peterson Capital. So one of the bigger firms in Canada is helping us tell our story. One of our challenges with our stock price is we don't have enough eyes on the stock, but we want to make sure that we're attracting the right kind of investor. And the only way to do that is find investors that will actually hear our story. So we're on an active roadshow across Canada, non-deal roadshow, just getting out there to talk to investors and tell our story. We actually had our first investor event of the last half of the year was in the south of France. Super exciting place to go. Wish I had time to enjoy it while I was there, but that was dealing with a lot of European investors that are super interested in investing in both our space and in Canadian companies. 10 quality issuers there. I mean, we were among some really impressive entrepreneurs, and about 35 qualified fund managers, high net worth individuals, and so on. And we were fortunate. I mean, we worked really hard, and we came away nominated or winning the trophy as being the #1 issuer at that event. And that was voted by the 35 investors. Super proud, especially given the company that was there, because I can tell you, I would have said it was neck and neck. There was some really quality companies there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, look, this is a good story. I know. So you've got a couple of challenges. We talked about it before we hopped on live here, but I mean, the overall markets, #1, a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty, right? And that's creating look, we haven't had a real bear market, an extended bear market in, I want to say 14 years, right? So 14 years, we're in one. And this one is, and there's still a shitload of uncertainty out there, but I do think that this too shall pass, right? Eventually we will turn around and head back up. It's just the way it is, unless it's the end of the world. And if it's the end of the world, then there's nothing we can do about it because it's the end of the world. So I do think this is going to pass. The other thing you've got going on is your sector is not hot right now for whatever reason, and it should be, because there's a lot going on. Like, for example, with Ukraine, that I think put a spotlight on the industry, right? This particular sector. Would you agree with that?
No, most definitely. I mean, Ukraine has demonstrated to the world that drones are changing the face of modern warfare. And that definitely should be something attracting people's attention to our sector. But from my standpoint, I think, obviously not happy with the performance of the stock price, but then not happy with the performance of the stock portfolio overall, right? But here's the way I look at it. Volatus, I take ownership for the things that we can control. And that's two things. First of all, continuing to execute as a company, because we don't exist for the capital markets. We exist to serve our clients and to continue to grow the business, which in the end should create value and wealth for our investors, for the people that have supported us along the way. I can't change the market conditions, but what I can do is look at our own stock performance and look at some things that we can control. Stock price, that's a market issue. What we were lacking was largely volumes. There was, if nobody's trading any paper, then nothing happens. So
right.
That was a function of not having enough eyes on the stock. We need to expand our shareholder base. We need to get out there. We need to make sure that enough people are looking at our story, that when the sentiment does change in the market, we'll get traction. Because if you look at it, I can't look at the stock price very often. It's distracting. And the truth of the matter is, it's not reflective of what's going on in the business.
I mean, you can't run the business off of what the stock price is doing.
So what I look at today is actually volume. I pay attention to making sure that we've got volume happening every day, and that we're growing that volume, which is telling me that more people are watching the stock. We're already executing. You saw the results that we put out this week. We've closed 2 transactions. We've still got a couple of good months ahead of us for this year. But the reality is, good news isn't enough right now. But nonetheless, I believe it will be. I think from our standpoint, if we keep driving our volume up, we get more people interested in the stock, and we continue to execute. That's the key thing. And I had one of our investors tell me early on, execution cures all. The only question is how long that takes. And of course, when you're also, I would say a big part, about 50% of our growth comes from organic activities, and the other 50% comes from M&A. The industry is ripe for consolidation. It's the right time. So of course, the market price does matter. When we have stock prices where they are today, it's more, you have to be, more creative and more sensitive to the deal structures. And I think it's probably worth us talking about one of those as we go forward here a little bit. But I believe the other thing, here's the thing, right? Historically, the sky only falls just so far. I believe we're kind of near bouncing off of the bottom. Better days are ahead. Ultimately, I watched one of our investors who wrote a blog about our company recently, comparing us to a couple of industry peers. And he said, you can always wait until the stock starts going upward, right? Buy it when it's up around $1 as opposed to when it's at 30 cents. He kind of made a good point there. Now's an interesting time to invest. There's capital out there.
Listen,
people have to look at, to me, it's more important than ever that people actually look at the company, because if you invest in a good company and you invest at the stock prices that are there today, there has to be a future for that.
Listen, it's so funny because the stock market, and part of it is Wall Street itself is tried to keep retail investors actually pretty dumb, right? So never add to a losing position is a common thing that I hear. Well, that's the dumbest thing. It all depends on your time frame, right? Everybody can be right in a stock. Shorts can be right for a period of time. Longs can be right over a period of time. And it always takes longer. I can tell you this, being that I've been doing this for over 30 years. It always takes longer than I anticipate it's going to take for the stock to finally show what it's worth, right? I don't know why. It's always, you could have the best news and the stock will go down on the announcement of the news, right? It's like, wait a minute, they just killed it and the thing went down because everything that happens in the stock market, a lot of time there's no rhyme or reason, right? It's a patience game. And if you're an impatient individual, you're going to probably get hurt in the stock market. If you can be patient and you take your time and you get to know management and you get to understand the vision, where they're going, the strategy on how they're going to get there, the capital structure of the company, all of those things, the total addressable market, what are the opportunities? These are the things that you learn that give you the conviction to hold through all the bullshit that you're going to see on the chat boards and all this other stuff from guys that don't know what they're talking about, right? When you really, really know a company intimately, you can feel very, very, very comfortable in sitting on it and saying, you know what, this is an opportunity to add to my position. For some reason, everything else in the world, when it goes on sale, is a bargain, it's a buy. But in the stock market, when a company goes on sale, for some reason, it's not a buy. I don't know why that is. A lot of these guys, these talking heads on CNBC and Bloomberg, right? It's cheap for a reason. It's a bad stock. Well, that's a bunch of bullshit, because there are cheap stocks that are great companies, and there are expensive stocks that are really crappy companies, and they just haven't figured it out yet. Those are going to come down and go to who knows what, maybe disappear. But there's good and bad in every type of company. Every big company at one point was a little company. Microsoft was started out of a garage, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Bezos out of his little garage or basement or wherever he was in. All of them were penny stocks or at one point, right? I think Volatus has great leadership, great innovation, great vision in would you call this industry in its infancy stages, maybe?
Most certainly. Certainly, I always say we're starting to rocket out of a nascent phase. Adoption rates are huge all over the place, but you know what? It's new technology. It's there's a lot of things that are kind of filling the sails and creating a tailwind. It's an ESG poster child as an industry.
And why is that? Let's hit on that for a second. So let's talk about one of your recent acquisitions, right? You just did it's an oil pipeline. What is it? Surveying, I guess.
So it's an airborne data company basically, but their primary platforms are helicopters, conventional fixed wings like Cessnas, and some drones. And what we really acquired, they're called Synergy Aviation. They're based out of Edmonton, Alberta, and they're a well-established company doing pipeline integrity monitoring. So they fly patrol. So I want you to imagine, first of all, on a North American level, there's about 3,000 miles of pipeline across North America, Canada, United States, that has, 3 million miles of pipeline that has to be inspected by air anywhere from once a year to once a week. A big chunk of it is very frequently. And they've been doing it the same way for 40 years. So it's monitoring the integrity of the pipeline. They're looking for threats like erosion, backhoes, because remember, pipeline does run in some cases, in a lot of cases, under private property. It's not just a designated right of way. And then you'll have the concern over leaks and all of the things that are obvious. So they've been monitoring that using helicopters and aircraft for the last 40 odd years, since I first got into the aviation industry as a young guy. There's a pilot, there's a visual observer, they're identifying it, they're reporting it back to the oil and gas company who go out and check it out and do whatever they do after that to protect the assets and the environment. So Synergy has about 500,000 kilometers. So what's that? Probably 350,000 miles of pipeline or pipeline right-of-way that they monitor on a regular basis. And they do it for a lot of large oil companies. They download the data into a proprietary software, they analyze it, and they create actionable intelligence products that customers can ultimately use both to monitor their infrastructure and to meet the regulatory compliance requirements of the areas that the pipelines are running in. But they've been doing it with helicopters and airplanes, which are operated, they're carbon, they've got a greenhouse gas emission every hour they fly, right? They're, depending on the size of the aircraft and helicopter, they're burning fossil fuels continuously. Drone technologies, remotely piloted assets, can be introduced into this space to do a number of things. Create using sensors and machine learning, or artificial intelligence, we oftentimes call it, something that when the drone flies down a pipeline, it identifies this yellow piece of equipment, and the machine learning understands the difference between a backhoe and a bulldozer. A backhoe or a bulldozer, let's say, is important, but not urgent because they push, right? They don't dig. Right. A backhoe is important and urgent. So it has the ability to identify the problem, geo-reference it, create high-resolution photos, and transmit it immediately. Right. So now the utility that's responsible, the asset owner, can actually take action immediately. So the other thing is, I'm going to say 97% of our technologies, and I'm actually guessing because I believe it's closer to 100% of Volatus technologies are green. So they're all electric battery operated technologies that can start to supplement or replace conventional aircraft or helicopters. So that was the objective of acquiring the company. What we acquired was contracts to monitor 500,000 kilometers of oil and gas pipeline right-of-way. And now we have the ability with our customers to introduce green solutions that ultimately help them with a big win, both on data and on scope 3 emission reductions.
Line of sight. I'm writing down line of sight.
Absolutely. Right? Just to finish this one off, to give you an idea of that deal, the company is expected to do approximately 9 million of revenues this year, $14 million positive EBITDA. We bought it. The valuation was 0.5x revenue, which translated to about 3.5x EBITDA. And what made it even more interesting for investors, because of where we are as an industry, the opportunities are quite interesting. We bought 51% through a working capital investment. So we invested about 2.3 million, or just shy of that, into the company, but we own 51% of the company. None of the cash left the building. It consolidates back to our balance sheet. And then we reached a deal. This is back to the creativity with current market conditions. Part of their incentive for the owners to be able to monetize their portion of the business, the sellers, is they've got to achieve certain performance metrics in the form of an earnout. And if they achieve those metrics, they can trigger a transaction for Volatus to buy the remaining 49% of the shares in exchange for equity in the public company. But the defined value is the defined value of the transaction. So it was 2.3 million for 51% and 2.1 million approximately for the remaining 49%. And to protect our investors against dilution, we have a cap on the cash. So 2.1 million is the cap. So the valuation is protected, but a 65-cent floor price on the share, which was our RTO price. So, and how do we get these deals? Because these companies went through COVID, sucked up all of their working capital, came out of COVID, started to perform like crazy and really do well, and started choking on the absence of working capital. And our current market condition doesn't make capital, affordable capital, easily available. And we actually did 2 acquisitions the same way. The second one was basically the same model.
So, that, and I think, you just touched on something that is I think a big concern, especially for, anyone that's looking at smaller companies, right? Being well capitalized. I mean, if you are a small company in this environment and you need to raise capital, this is not a fun time to be raising capital.
No, it's not for anybody. It's
No.
a difficult time for sure.
Yeah.
Some companies can do it a little easier. Being a public company, we have a little more access than some, but a lot of these small businesses, even if they can access it, it's not affordable.
There's a company that I mean, really, they just signed their death warrant. This is the way I look at it. I mean, the deal was so bad. I mean, 100% warrant coverage, 2-cent spread, 2-cent spread, and they can sell the shares immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to get buried. I mean, it's done. And they raise very little money and they're burned. I mean, there's just, the game's over as far as I'm concerned, right? I mean, you might as well just fold up shop now, but that's what people are looking at right now. If you're not, and I think you did a raise not long ago, but you didn't need to do the raise, number one, right? And as you said earlier, this is a target rich environment for acquisitions, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, the raise, in our case, the raise was done at 36 cents a unit. I'm talking Canadian dollars right now. Forgive me, that's where my brain is at the moment. But 36 cents a unit, which was one common share and 1 full warrant that was tradable for 2 years with a 50-cent exercise price. But the key reason that we raised it is the majority of our investors had been in for more than a year. So back when the market was hot, we hadn't raised money since a year ago, last June, and they were in for between 52 and 65 cents. Well, we went public in January and the stock price tracked the rest of the market. So down below 52 cents it went. And we discovered that our current investors basically sat back and went, well, you've been executing quarter after quarter. Bad markets will wait, which is really good on one hand, but on the other hand, you've got no paper trading hands. We have literally no liquidity or had very little liquidity. It was a problem. We just didn't have any volumes. So by putting some shares out there, I think it was like north of 11.5 million shares in the kind of context of the current market pricing with people that had a full warrant. What you had is people started as the stock goes up north of 36 cents. Now they're willing to do a little bit of trading, hang on to the warrants. And under normal circumstances, not something I would like. But right now, that actually helps solve our problem. It actually is like, I like to describe it to our people as that's the kindling on the fire, right? So now what do? We go out there, we have some rock star organizations. We have a couple of firms like Peterson Capital in Canada. It was actually their conference that we went to in Europe. That was the Canada Growth Conference that was presenting Canadian issuers to a bunch of European investors. Rick Peterson and his team do a phenomenal job at helping tell the story to qualified investors. Capital Event Management, another one out of Canada, is helping us, and then BTV, and of course, with the support of people like you, continuously updating our investors on our stock. We believe ultimately we start creating some volume. The story keeps going out there, getting more eyes on the stock. We're hoping in the near future we'll see some analyst coverage. And with all of those things adding together, I think the problem will become somewhat self-rectifying. And right now, when I even look at our sector, we're underperforming our sector. So what we're trying to do at this moment in time is—
You're talking about underperforming from your stock price.
Correct. I'm talking, yeah, I better correct it. Thank you for catching that. I'm about— my IR people would be smacking me right now. So in actual fact, financially, we're overperforming our sector in almost, I would say, to the best of my knowledge, every metric. But our stock price does
not reflect it.
No, it doesn't reflect it. So our stock price right now has, we like to say it's on sale. Great value to the investors. The biggest challenge I have, I get people asking me, what keeps you up at night? Well, the bottom line is I'm always in a restricted period because we always have material things on the go, right? That means I can't buy the stock myself, because otherwise at this price, that's probably the best indicator. Is right now I'd like to be buying some more myself.
That's something I love to see, Glenn. I mean, I do. I talked to a company the other day that's in the— there are a lot of companies, small companies, they're going through the same thing that you're going through, right? And they're executing, and their balance sheet is good, and things are good. The company's doing well, and we sometimes forget about the fact that we did just go through a pandemic, right? Yeah. I mean, for these companies that have been able to manage through that and grow their businesses, right? And you look at the difficulties, the challenges that they faced, and then boom, we come out of that and we go right into a war, and we got supply chain issues, we got this and that. All these things going on, and these companies are growing and strong. And that is impressive to me. And, I think to myself, man, when things do start to normalize, right? What is the growth going to be like for these guys when things are not— you're not having to put out fires all the time, right?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be amazing.
I think the opportunity right now is considerable. And, I try to be supportive in our industry. I'm really working hard right now. Our industry, in my opinion, is a poster child in terms of being an environmentally friendly industry. We're an ESG poster child.
Yep.
We're socially— well, there's always more work to be done. We're socially responsible by nature. It's largely fueled by the millennial and Gen Zers that are coming into the workforce. And a lot of our senior executives are now millennials. So much more inclusive and diverse workforce, very conscious of what we've done to our Indigenous citizens, over time, and the need for truth and reconciliation there. But on top of that, we're green technology. We're cutting edge we're using cutting edge technologies that are green. We're an immediate win. Unfortunately, as an industry, what we're not doing well is telling the world about that. And I was a keynote speaker last week in Calgary. And instead of talking about Volatus, I chose to talk about this very subject. And what I pointed out to everybody, in 2021, impact investment capital topped $1 trillion. 50% of that was in the Americas. And then Business Wire, middle of last month, and probably 3 weeks ago, put out an article that said that 85% of the world's consumers are now considering green in their purchasing. And a third of those people are actually willing to pay a green premium. They're willing to pay a little bit more to buy something that's environmentally friendly. Well, we are, as an industry, not just Volatus Aerospace, but as an industry, we have green technologies. We are a near zero or net zero certain group of service providers, which give a lot of heavy industry like rail, power utilities, and oil and gas pipeline companies a real opportunity for scope 3 wins. So for an industry that struggles to capitalize itself, we need to do more to tell the world, to attract the impact investment capital that's available and the impact investors. And there's lots of them, obviously.
So let me ask you a question. The line of sight thing that you just got approval, right? Or so there are limitations that the industry has had on it, and as things get lifted, like this line of sight, what is exact? Can you define that?
Absolutely. So one of the limitations on commercial drone activities today is that they're largely, I say largely, limited to the visual line of sight of the operator of the drone. So the person flying the drone has to be able to see the drone, or have a visual observer that's keeping an eye on it. Now we're working regulatory, the regulations are evolving, both Canada, the United States, and Europe, and other parts of the world, that will allow flight beyond visual line of sight. The technologies are evolving, and there are a handful of companies out there that are able to justify to the regulators that they have the ability to do this and get special authority to operate outside of the current regulations. In the United States, they call it a waiver, a Part 107 waiver, that allows beyond visual line of sight, or what they term as BVLOS is the acronym, BVLOS. In Canada, we call it a Special Flight Operating Certificate. So Volatus has had a series of events leading up to an event in your hometown that I sincerely regret not being there to invite you out to myself. But so in June, we launched this autonomous nesting station. I think we've talked about that before. It was called an airport. It's basically an infrastructure that provides charging, connectivity, and safe accommodation for drones. We can put those out in the middle of a farm field in upper gum rubber boot, run it off of a photoelectric cell, so a solar cell, and using 4SIM 5G modem with an Iridium SATCOM plugin, we can actually operate this thing totally off grid. And that's what that was designed for. That was out in June. In August, we received special flight operating authority. This is Volatus, to operate a drone without a visual observer, using an optical detect and avoidance system to provide deconfliction with what they call uncooperative traffic, really other airplanes, crewed aircraft or helicopters that may not be coordinated. So we can see them and respond to that. And inside of an active airport. So it was a very, very high level regulatory approval, the first that had ever happened in Canada, where you could operate without a visual observer inside of an airport. And then in September, in Las Vegas, out in the desert, we actually flew 2 drones simultaneously in front of our industry, and the pilot was more than 3,000 kilometers away in Canada. And if you roll all of those things together, we've now demonstrated that we can take the air report that you have on your screen there right now, put it in the middle of a remote oil and gas infrastructure location, and operate the drones to conduct daily inspections without having to send somebody out. Imagine a field or a region like northern Saskatchewan that has 300 pump jacks pumping oil every day that have to be inspected daily to make sure that mechanically they're sound and that we don't have leaks and all those other kind of things. Instead of sending pickup trucks out there with human observers, we can actually take a drone, plunk this nesting station in a strategic location, and when it's aloft, using high resolution zoom on cameras, be able to stream live feed video to qualified inspectors in the comfort of their own offices, so that they only have to dispatch trucks to repair them. Again, from a green standpoint, no trucks on the road. From a human standpoint, you don't have people trudging out in the middle of nowhere, looking at this stuff unless there's a reason.
As regulations loosen up, right, more uses become for first responders, right? Being able
That's
to send,
right now. Yeah, they call it PFR, drones as a first responder. That's a massive sector in itself.
Right. So I mean, you can send out the drones to assess what's happening on the ground, like for a fire department or whatever, or what's happening at a building from multiple angles, right, before they even get there.
We have a fire department right now. The fire chief oversees 5 stations, and we're developing a program for them where they'll be able to launch a drone out when there's a fire, launch the drone immediately. So while the firefighters are putting on their gear and jumping in their trucks, a drone's already on its way to the site, is actually able to live feed data from the scene back into the first responders, so that before they get there, they know what they're doing. On top of that, because you've got thermal capabilities, we can be determining whether a structure is safe for them to vent the roof, or imagine a rollover, or God forbid, a train problem, where we've got chemicals that light on fire if a train derailment. Should the first responders be running to or from, right? Is it a recovery? Is it a rescue or a recovery operation? And are we potentially creating a bigger problem by sending first responders into a perilous situation? Well, by being able to identify with thermal imaging what the temperature of that truck is, and the temperature and the flash point of the chemicals, smarter people than me can figure out whether it's safe to go. So that's just one example. I want you to imagine a police situation. You've got bad guys hiding around a building somewhere. They can put a drone in the air and all of a sudden have eyes on immediately. And in some cases where you'd say, well, drones only have about 45 to 90 minutes of battery life, they can actually take a drone, fly to the other side of an incident site, park it on a building on the other side, zoom a camera in and literally sit it there. They call it perching, being able to keep eyes on now with minimum battery draw so that they can avoid sending officers into harm's way. We do the same thing inside of a building. We can send a drone in to figure out whether there's bad guys in there and do they have any weapons.
Yep.
That technology, that's not coming. That's here today.
Right. And that's why when we talk about the industry is so small, and that's why I say it's in its infancy, because I don't even think we really have figured out all the uses or the applications that we're going to be able to have with them, right?
I want to tell you, you live in Las Vegas, which has one of the most advanced public safety drone programs for law enforcement anywhere in the Americas. I need to create an introduction for you because Volatus, or let me just say, the fellow that built the drone program for the Las Vegas Police Department was a fellow by the name of Dave Martell. He still lives in Las Vegas. He actually works for Volatus full-time right now. We have two fellows straight out of law enforcement, one in Canada, Andy Olson, Dave Martell in the United States. And their main mission is to get out there and educate the public safety in general on the possibilities of drones as a first responder. And then as they adopt the equipment, to provide the training, scenario-based training, and help them make the most of those technologies.
No, that is so fantastic. So let's talk about the other acquisition real quick here. I know you're pressed for time, but let's talk about the other acquisition and why and what made you do that one.
So that acquisition was called iRed Remote Sensing. It's based about an hour, I'm going to say a little over an hour southwest of London in the UK. And it's a company it started out in thermography in 2002. They were doing everything from building inspections to equestrian, looking at applications in the equestrian field with thermography. And then as drones were introduced, they discovered that drones could actually be used to mount their thermographic sensors to do bigger scans of buildings and so on. And that's how they entered the drone industry. And from there, they grew into a general drone service provider. But they're still one of the most advanced companies in thermography. They're also recognized as a training organization by the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK. Now, we acquired them, gave us two benefits. One of them was a strategic expansion into the market. In the UK, we already had an office over there. So now we have infrastructure to support a lot of the pipeline that we've developed, and also a relatively stable market to help us grow into Western Europe and in the African markets where we're also pushing out. Well established in the UK. The last thing, so geographic expansion on one side, we have the opportunity to take Volatus product distribution, introduce that as a revenue stream into that company. So we should be able to grow it, have some healthy growth there in the future. But then we also took the thermographic capabilities of that company, bring it back to North America, and we're able to provide some very, very sophisticated training for thermography, and also thermographic applications like in forestry, for example, mapping out and identifying hotspots and knowing the difference between, somebody's barbecue and an actual hotspot that's a concern. So, and again, talking about the transaction, that one was about, if I remember right, it was south of 0.7x revenue. The company is will generate or is expected to generate about $1 million this year. So it's a small company, but it's all service based. So lots of room for growth there. And then it's generating a positive EBITDA, about 7%, with good room for improvement in their margins. And again, the investment was done as an investment in working capital. We bought 51% of the company with an option to buy out the balance. And that 51% was a working capital investment straight into the company. So it reconsolidates back to our balance sheet. No money left the building. And we're hoping that investment, combined with the exchange of capabilities from Volatus and to Volatus, gives us an opportunity to create some real synergies in terms of growth with that company.
So either one of the companies have a proprietary software or patented software or intellectual property that you also acquired?
Yeah, so the intellectual property is in Synergy. That's where we have that software platform that's quite exciting. But again, the advantage we have, even in Volatus, in our flight systems group, we have about $5 million worth of IP. We don't advertise it a lot because I like to tell people we're not an IP company. We're an industrial commercial company. We focus on solving problems, generating revenue, and customer stickiness. But we actually have a lot of technologies that we own across the group, or that we develop in our solutions engineering group to solve problems today. And that technology, we're able to kind of leverage the entire reach of all of the acquisitions we've made to be able to create some good distribution channels for the products.
So, real quickly, I just want to touch on, because we talked about this the very first time we spoke. When you do acquisitions, back in the day, there used to be this thing called the honeymoon period, and then you get rid of all the management, and you push in your own people. And I always thought that was the dumbest thing. And you and I talked about that. That isn't your philosophy at all.
Not at all. So far we've retained 100% of the leadership. We don't impose any new staff. Typically, where Volatus supports the companies is financial administration, which they usually ask for, sales, because our sales and marketing team is at a corporate level, and then contracts, legal activities, because again, we have our own contracts team that supports each one of the companies. But the way I look at it, the very thing you buy potentially walks out the door, right? Tribal knowledge is one of the biggest, most important things. Plus, all of your employees are invested in their brands. All of your leadership is invested in their brand, and customers recognize the brand. So by cleaning house or imposing new people, you potentially damage your brand equity. You lose a lot of tribal knowledge. And then the last thing, which is probably, last but not least, I'll say, is every company has something to teach us. No matter, their balance sheet could be upside down, they may have other problems in their company, but there's always something that they do that's exponentially better than what everybody else is doing. And if you're too busy trying to change them, you don't learn anything. But if you go in there saying, what can we do to help, and thank you for welcoming us into your world, and you pay attention, you learn. And then you can share what you learn across the entire network, which makes the whole company strong. And the other thing it does is it helps maintain the pride of the unit, the human folks that you just brought on board, those resources. They're proud because they're not just acquired, they're contributing, right? They're now part of something bigger, and they're making a difference. And that's the reason, from our standpoint, walking in Synergy is about unlocking potential, not walking in with a hatchet.
And I love this, and that's why I say right leadership in place, because that is the philosophy I think you have to have, right? You bought this company because you obviously, they're doing something right? Maybe they're not doing everything right, but you have departments that can help them do the other stuff right. Maybe they're not good at accounting. That's fine. We'll take over your accounting. You do what you're good at. Right? Let us unlock that for you. Take the cuffs off and just go. Right?
That's the secret right there.
That's the secret. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love. I love about your philosophy. I love what you're doing. I know the capital markets are not your friend right now, but I do truly believe that at some point, you said it earlier, keep executing. That's the only thing I can say is eventually the market will get it. I promise you. It takes longer a lot of times longer than you think it should, but at some point it will reflect in the share price, right? This is a very young company, and this is a very young industry, right? That has got I see a huge future ahead of it. Let's talk real quickly. I know we're already pressing, but you got the plane. What is it called? Nautilus, or
Yep, Nautilus.
Right?
So that's a California-based company. Actually, they're out of San Diego. Really great company. We don't own that company, just to be clear. We're the first customer. They're developing a 19,000-pound cargo aircraft, which reduces the cost of cargo by about 54%, cuts the carbon footprint in half by basically carrying 3 times the cargo of traditional means of carrying. So it's kind of that middle mile space. It's a $280 billion space. We expect to enter in 2028. 2025. I'm sorry. That's assuming they're on schedule, and of course, some of that's within their control, and some of it isn't. But they're doing a great job. Interesting technology, well worth having a look at.
And you've ordered one of the very first,
Correct.
Right?
So they've got literally billions of dollars of expressions of interest from the airlines. And ultimately, we already have an expertise in operating commercial aircraft, jets, turboprops, helicopters, conventional aircraft. That's where we've come from.
And you yourself are a pilot.
I am. Yeah. My background is business aviation for best part of 40 years. And while I've been a CEO for 35 of those, I actually continued to fly to some degree right up until just a couple of years ago. I still fly myself around to get to our locations in a small airplane, but I continued to fly a business jet right up until, it would have been the middle of the pandemic. Volatus was just getting too busy and couldn't, jack of all trades, master of none. Decided that wasn't the place to spend my time, but it's certainly an industry that I understand well. So we're positioning ourselves to be an early adopter of the technologies, which ultimately, hopefully, will lead to relationships with some of the major airlines.
And you've kept the commercial license, right?
We have 3 as a company. We have 3 companies that actually have commercial aircraft licenses of various shapes and sizes. But while it's not the primary focus of our business today, it's really preparing, even on the cargo side. Cargo is a relatively small part of our business. We do have a team that's focused on it, but more focused on remote communities, intra-island, heavy industrial sites, places that we can actually generate revenue today, even the resupply of oil platforms. But long-term, the intent is as that grows, we'll have the expertise in remotely piloted technologies, operating drones as the service vehicle. And of course, we already have the expertise in the larger aircraft. So we believe we're well positioned to be a prime operator in that larger remotely piloted aircraft space.
Okay. Glenn, listen, we could talk for, you got so much going on. We could talk for probably another 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
But look, I love what you're doing. I want to talk about the stock real quickly here, the price, the chart. Look, the way I view it is the sector, if you look at a lot of the companies within this space, it's just not a hot space right now, even though it should be, in my view, because of Ukraine and the discovering what use cases there are for drones. And I think it's only going to get bigger. The ESG component, I think, is massive, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And just beginning. So I know the drones are used in the construction industry it seems like on a higher level all the time, right? Inspections of sewers and all kinds of stuff. This is an exciting industry, and you guys are probably considered the 800-pound gorilla, I would think, right?
Well, I think we're certainly getting to that point. Our lots of work left to do. Even with our forecast of in the 38 to 40 million pro forma revenue basis, we're still, it's still a small industry, but in the drone industry, I would say we're certainly starting to move towards that 800-pound gorilla category.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the Lockheed Martins and the Kratos, I'm not talking about the Defense Department stuff here. I'm talking about your what do I want to call it? Your zone, right?
In our zone, I would say that's an accurate description of who we are right now. Lots of room left to grow, though. I mean, despite the fact that we're probably the bigger player right now, there's still so much potential. I don't anticipate that growth slowing down anytime soon.
Glenn, are you going to do anything stupid to hurt the company?
I certainly hope not. I would say, honestly, the model we're doing is working. Nurturing that model, I have to tell you, Tim, the key point that I would say that never comes out in any of these sessions. They're talking to me. I try to get exposure for our CFO as often as possible. As a matter of fact, be a good guy for you to talk to one time, because he knows the story as well as I do. But honestly, we have a hell of a mature team. I take a lot of credit for things that I don't do, right? There's a serious bunch of people. Most of our senior team, or many of our senior team, are capable of doing my job, right? We have good succession planning. If I got run over by a bus, Volatus isn't slowing down.
Well, but we want you to stick around.
Right? Yeah, well, I'm staying away from buses. So.
We definitely want you to stick around. I don't want to see you going anywhere, because I think you're the right guy, right? I think you're the right guy for this job, right?
That's
so
fine. Thank you.
Just real quickly on the chart. First of all, you don't have a lot of history on the chart, right? Because you guys have just recently listed, right? So this is a young company, but here's the deal. You know the story. This is now the third time. Just so everybody understands, I don't interview companies that I do not think eventually are going to make their shareholders money. I mean, that's the reality. I will not interview companies, and I certainly won't have them back for second or third or fourth time, right? I mean, this is a story that I am invested in for the long term. I see this as being in its infancy stages, and this is the time when you start to build your position, and when the markets aren't friendly, and this is an opportunity to add to that position, right? I'm not fully invested. I invest over time. And what I would suggest to anybody watching this is, if you're not familiar with this story, start following the story, right? Go to Volatus and sign up for their investor email alerts. Anytime they put out a press release or an SEC filing, you'll get it sent directly to your email. And just keep your eye on what is happening with the industry and this company in particular, right? And then, Glenn, I'm sure if there's anybody out there that's watching this that has any questions about anything with pertaining to investing in Volatus, you'd be more than happy to take a call.
Absolutely. We try to be available as much as we can to our investors. I recognize that when people invest in the company, they're actually my partners. So the decisions that I'm making are impact all of us. And on top of that, we've actually found when we've got interested investors, they tend to bring more investors, and oftentimes they bring opportunities for us. When you've got eyeballs all over the globe that are watching your story and watching your sector, if they've got access to you, we've also found that they bring opportunities to us. And
Right.
That's happened numerous times so far. So if somebody connects with us through the investor relation page, you'll find that the callback you're going to get is only from one of three people. It'll either be from our head of Marcom, Danielle Gagne, who will call to set up a call with either Abby or myself, or it'll be our CFO or myself actually calling back. Not saying we can do that forever. As the company gets bigger, time becomes more and more challenging. And as our investor base grows, it's more and more challenging. But we're going to try to do that as long as we can, to really help people understand the story. And the only questions that I consider to be bad questions are the ones that don't get asked. And I don't care how tough the questions are, I welcome them. Our team knows the business, and, we have some people that like to talk to me and then they want to talk to our CFO separately. I'm good with that.
Right.
Absolutely good with that.
All right. So look, I think this is a fantastic place that if you're not in the stock, what's your downside risk? What is it? 25 cents, 29 cents, 29 cents.
It's a great
All
day
right.
today.
That's your downside risk. And that's if the company goes to zero, right? Which I don't think you have any plans of shutting down, do you?
Not anytime soon.
All right. And then what's your potential upside? That's the question. How many shares are there fully diluted outstanding, Glenn?
I'm going to,
You know,
approximately 100 and 100. I'm going to say 125, somewhere around 120. I would say 120 million.
right. So I would consider that still to me, that's still a fairly small outstanding share count, right?
Yep.
In my view.
Well, another point I'd make with that, this is an important one. Approximately on a fully diluted basis, approximately 54% of the shares are still held by insiders. And if you track insider trading, not one person has sold a single share. As a matter of fact, we continue to participate anytime we have raises. It's a strong story. The people that are actually making decisions inside of the company are invested in the company, invested in the story, and even in our senior leadership, we have a good ESOP program. We made sure, I think earlier this year, we had an issuance of stock options, and if anybody digs deep into that, they'll discover that they did not go to Glen Lynch, right? They actually went to our senior leadership and named employees, people that actually have a material interest and ability to influence the price of the stock with decisions they make every day. So we're trying to make sure that, key decision makers and important employees within the company, they're all important, but there's a maturity level as that people reach inside of the company. We want as many of our employees to be shareholders as possible.
That's another thing that I happen to love as well, right? I mean, I do think everybody in the organization, all the way down to the janitors, should have shares in the
I agree wholeheartedly, and understand what it means when they make a decision. So the decision is, you're doing two things at the same time. What's best for the company is the first priority. We have to protect the company always and keep moving forward. And the second thing is, when we actually talk about it and how we talk about it, what's that going to do for our investors? Do people understand what we're doing? The example today, we talked about all the series of announcements we made around our air report, remote operations, and the beyond visual line of sight. How do they connect to the oil and gas industry we just stepped into? We have to tell those stories, help people understand it, so that ultimately it can generate some wealth for our investors.
Right. All right, Glenn. Look, I love it, man. Let's next you're probably going to have some significant news sooner, but we're going to have to, span these things out. I can't have you back every week. So, but we'll do it again real soon when you have something significant, right?
Tim, thanks for the opportunity. Always great talking to you. Appreciate your support.
All right, hold on one second. I'm going to turn this off. Hey there, all you stock market junkies. Thanks for tuning in to yet another CEO follow-up interview here at Alpha Wolf Trading. Today we had Volatus Aerospace, ticker symbol VLTTF, CEO Glen Lynch. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, why not give us a follow? Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.